Mina Kang understood the architecture of silence. There was the heavy, oppressive silence of a room she had just cleaned, waiting for inspection. There was the brittle, anxious silence of the moments before Hana Kim spoke. And there was the vast, hollow silence of her own life, a space she had meticulously curated to keep herself safe. It was a silence built not of peace, but of absence, an absence of complaint, an absence of desire, an absence of self. She was, at this moment, submerged in the second kind, the brittle kind. Hana, younger daughter of the formidable Kim family, was watching her. Mina was on her knees on a silk Isfahan rug, polishing the base of a heavy bronze sculpture that was worth more than every apartment she had ever lived in combined. The polish smelled of bitter chemicals, a scent that clung to the back of her throat. Hana did not speak. She simply observed, her posture a performance of casual authority. She was draped over a velvet chaise lounge, one leg swinging, the toe of her jewel-encrusted heel catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse was a glass box in the sky, overlooking a city that felt 1,000,000 miles away. From this height, the people below were just an abstraction, a smear of movement. It was, Mina thought, how Hana saw everyone who was not her. "You missed a spot," Hana said finally. Her voice was light, almost musical, but it landed on Mina's skin like a shard of ice. Mina's hand did not falter. She continued her small, circular motions with the soft cloth. She knew, with the bone-deep certainty of long practice, that there was no missed spot. This was not about the sculpture. It was never about the thing itself. It was a test of obedience, a reminder of station. She moved the cloth to the area Hana had indicated with a flick of her chin, an imaginary speck of dust her only target. She did not look up. She did not sigh. She did not give Hana the satisfaction of a reaction. This was the core of her survival strategy, to become a surface so smooth, so placid, that the cruelty simply slid off. But today, the surface felt thin. Today, the silence inside her was threatening to crack. It had been a year of fetching water that was precisely the wrong temperature, of re-ironing silk blouses that were already perfect, of absorbing quiet little cruelties that left no visible bruises but corroded the spirit. She had taken the job as a live-in housekeeper and personal assistant to Hana because she had needed a place to disappear. Her previous life had ended in a fire of betrayal and public humiliation. A business partner who had stolen her designs and her future, leaving her with nothing but debt and a name she no longer wanted. The Kim penthouse, with its anonymous corridors and rigorous schedules, had seemed like the perfect fortress, a place to be invisible. She had not accounted for Hana. "Are you deaf?" Hana's voice sharpened. "I said you missed a spot, right there." She pointed now, her finger accusatory. Mina paused. She looked at the spot. It was flawless, a perfect, gleaming curve of bronze. She could see her own distorted reflection in it, a woman on her knees, her face a blank mask. She thought about standing up. She thought about saying, "There is nothing there." She thought about walking out of the room, packing the few belongings she kept in her small, sterile room in the staff wing and never coming back. But the hollow silence of her life echoed back at her. Where would she go? The debts were still a shadow at her heels. Her confidence, once the engine of her life, was a sputtering, unreliable thing. So she stayed on her knees. "My apologies, Miss Kim," she murmured, her voice a carefully constructed monotone. She polished the non-existent spot again. And again. Hana made a sound of disgust. A little puff of air. Useless! She stood up, the movement fluid and annoyed. She paced the room, her heels sinking into the priceless rug. "My brother is coming home tonight. Everything has to be perfect. And I have you fumbling with a dust rag." Jin-woo, the elder son, the head of the family. Mina had only seen him a handful of times in the year she had been here. He was a creature of a different realm, a man who moved through the world with a stillness that was more intimidating than any overt display of power. He was not loud or demanding like his sister. He was the kind of man whose quiet entrance could drain the sound from a room. His suits were dark, impeccably tailored. His face was a study in controlled neutrality. He had a reputation in the city, whispered in tones of fear and awe. Mina did not know the details, only that the Kim family's vast wealth was not built on anything as simple as stocks and bonds. There was something older, harder, and more dangerous at its core. When he was in residence, the air in the penthouse changed. It became charged, heavier. Even Hana tempered her behavior, her cruelty becoming more subtle, her voice dropping a few decibels. His presence demanded a different kind of perfection. Not the fussy, arbitrary perfection Hana demanded, but a deep, structural order, a sense of absolute control. "And look at this," Hana said, her voice rising again. She had stopped in front of a small, delicate credenza near the window. On it sat a collection of objects. Among them was a single small celadon vase. It was not part of the Kim family's collection. It was Mina's. It was the only beautiful thing she had managed to salvage from the wreckage of her old life. A piece she had designed and fired herself, its glaze the color of a winter sea. She had asked permission to keep it in her room, but Hana had insisted it be brought out, treating it like a curiosity, another object she owned by proxy. "This pathetic little pot," Hana sneered, picking it up. Her fingers were careless on the delicate ceramic. "It throws off the whole room. It's so common." Mina's heart seized. The brittle silence in the room was now vibrating with a new sharp terror. That vase was not just a vase. It was a memory. It was proof of the person she used to be, the person who created things, who had a voice, who had a future. "Please be careful with that," Mina said. The words escaped before she could stop them. They were quiet, but in the charged space between them, they sounded like a shout. Hana's head snapped toward her. A slow, venomous smile spread across her face. It was the expression of a predator that had finally drawn blood. "What did you say?" "I just asked you to be careful," Mina repeated, her voice steadier this time. She began to get to her feet. The ache in her knees was nothing compared to the cold dread coiling in her stomach. "You're giving me instructions now?" Hana laughed, a high, ugly sound. "The help is giving me instructions on how to handle her cheap little trinkets in my own home." She held the vase aloft, turning it in the light. "You know, I think I agree with myself. It really is common. It's dragging down the aesthetic of the entire floor." And with a flick of her wrist, she let it drop. Mina did not scream. The sound of the celadon shattering on the polished marble floor was unnaturally loud, a sharp, final crack that broke the afternoon into a before and an after. The pieces scattered, the color of a winter sea turning into jagged, dead fragments. For a long moment, Mina just stared at the wreckage. It was more than broken pottery. It was the last piece of her old self, deliberately destroyed. A message. You are nothing. What was yours is mine to break. What you were is gone. Hana watched her, her eyes glittering with triumph. She was waiting for the tears, for the pleading, for the collapse. She had pushed, and now she expected the reward of Mina's complete and utter devastation. Mina looked from the broken pieces of her past to Hana's smug face, and the silence inside her finally, irrevocably, broke. It was not a loud shattering, like the vase. It was a quiet, cold snap, the sound of a chain breaking, the smooth, placid surface she had maintained for a year fissured, and underneath was not devastation, but something cold and hard and clear. She looked directly into Hana's eyes. She did not say a word. She simply held her gaze. The blankness was gone from her face, replaced by a clarity that was so absolute it was unnerving. Hana's smile faltered. This was not the reaction she had wanted. "Well?" she demanded, her voice a little too high. "Aren't you going to clean up your mess?" Mina remained standing. She did not move toward the pieces. She did not look away from Hana. And then a new sound entered the room. It was the soft clink of heavy crystal meeting a marble coaster. The sound was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it cut through the tension like a razor. It came from the far side of the room, from a deep leather armchair that was turned away from them, facing the sprawling cityscape. An armchair Mina had assumed was empty. Hana froze. A flicker of confusion, then alarm, crossed her face. Slowly, the armchair swiveled around. Kim Jin-woo sat there, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He was not supposed to be home for hours. He was not supposed to be in this room. He wore a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. He was preternaturally still, his presence a sudden, massive weight in the atmosphere. He was not looking at his sister. His dark, unreadable eyes were fixed on Mina. He had seen everything. The power in the room did not just shift, it vanished from Hana and reappeared, condensed and absolute, in the man in the chair. He did not rush. He was not performing. His power was not a costume he wore, like his sister's. It was the structural support of the entire building. He was the foundation. He was the gravity. Hana paled. The arrogant posture, the performative confidence, all of it evaporated. She looked, for the first time since Mina had met her, small, frightened. "Jin-woo," she stammered, a frantic, placating smile plastered on her face. "I didn't know you were here. We were just—" She trailed off, unable to form a coherent lie under his silent, unwavering gaze. Jin-woo did not acknowledge her. He did not even glance at her. His focus remained entirely on Mina, who stood frozen between the triumphant sister and the shattered remains of her past. He studied her face, his expression revealing nothing. But his gaze was not empty. It was analytical. It was assessing. It was the kind of look a man gives to something of immense value that has been mishandled. He had not updated the file. That was the thought that occurred to him. His sister was working from a version of Mina Kang that had never been accurate. A file that read, housekeeper, servant, invisible. He had a different file. His file was thicker. It contained university transcripts with honors in art history and ceramics. It contained glowing letters of recommendation from professors. It contained the business plan for a small, promising design studio. It contained the details of a brutal corporate betrayal that had left her financially and emotionally crippled. He had read the entire file. He knew exactly who was standing in his living room. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, a quiet rumble that carried more authority than a shout ever could. "Hana!" It was the only word he said to her, but in that single word there was a universe of disappointment and cold fury. She flinched as if struck. Then he returned his attention to Mina. He rose from the chair. The movement was unhurried, economical. He walked not toward his sister, but toward the broken shards of celadon on the floor. He stopped and looked down at them, his hands clasped behind his back. "Joseon Dynasty Revival," he said, his voice still quiet. "The glaze is a custom mix. Iron-based, with a very low oxygen firing. Difficult to master." Mina's breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just looking at broken pottery. He was seeing it. He was reading it. He saw the technique, the intention, the artist behind it. In a single sentence, he had validated a part of her she thought had been extinguished forever. He turned his head slowly and looked at her. "You have a good eye, and a steady hand." It was not a compliment. It was a statement of fact, a diagnosis. Hana made a small, strangled sound. She was being erased from the conversation, rendered as irrelevant as a piece of furniture. Her own brother was discussing pottery techniques with the help over the mess she had made. "Jin-woo, she is just the help!" Hana finally burst out, her voice shrill with desperation. "She was being insubordinate. I was simply teaching her a lesson." Jin-woo turned his head to look at his sister. It was a slow, deliberate movement. The kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. It settled over Hana, smothering her. "You," he said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming as soft and as dangerous as falling snow. We'll go to your room. You will pack a bag. A car will be here in 20 minutes to take you to the country estate. You will remain there until I decide otherwise." It was not a suggestion. It was the pronouncement of a sentence. "What?" Hana's face crumpled. "For this? For a stupid pot? She is nobody." "That is where you are mistaken," Jinwoo said, his gaze as flat and hard as obsidian. "You have been mistaken for a year." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once and held it up. "Mr. Choi." A man materialized from the hallway as if summoned from the shadows. Mr. Choi was as immaculately dressed as his employer, his face impassive. He was Jinwoo's right hand, a man who moved without wasted motion. "Escort my sister to her room," Jinwoo said, not looking at him. "Ensure she is in the car in 20 minutes. "Yes, Mr. Kim," Mr. Choi said. He took a step toward Hana. "No!" Hana shrieked, her face contorting with rage and disbelief. "You can't do this! Father would never allow it." "Father is in Seoul," Jinwoo stated calmly. "And I am the head of this family, a position that comes with certain responsibilities, one of which is maintaining standards." He gestured almost imperceptibly at the broken vase. "This is a failure of standards." He looked at Hana. "You are a failure of standards. Now go." Hana stared at him, her chest heaving. She looked for an ally, for some sign of weakness, but there was none. There was only the quiet, unshakable authority of her brother and the impassive presence of Mr. Choi. Defeated, she let out a sob of pure fury and spun around, storming out of the room with Mr. Choi following at a respectful, non-negotiable distance. The room fell silent again, but this was a different silence. It was a weighted silence filled with the aftermath of a seismic event. Mina stood, trembling slightly, amidst the wreckage. She felt exposed, raw. She had been the catalyst for a battle she never wanted to fight. Jinwoo turned back to her. He walked the few steps that separated them and stopped. He was tall, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around them, the only sign that he was human. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was steady as iron wrapped in silk. She shook her head, unable to speak. He looked down at the fragments of her vase. "This can't be repaired." It was another statement of fact. "But it can be remade." He looked back at her, and his eyes held hers. "You will no longer be in my sister's employ. Your position here has been reclassified. Your things will be moved from the staff wing to the guest suite on the west side of the penthouse. You will report directly to me." Mina found her voice. It was thin, but it was hers. "Mr. Kim, I can't—" "It is already done," he said, cutting her off gently. He was not being unkind. He was simply removing obstacles. He was clearing a path. "Your previous employment contract has been terminated. A new one has been drawn up. It is on the desk in my study. It offers you the position of curator for my private art collection. The salary is commensurate with the title." She stared at him, her mind reeling. Curator. The word felt foreign, a language she had not spoken in years. It was a word that belonged to the woman she used to be. "Why?" she whispered. Jinwoo considered the question for a moment. He did not offer platitudes about her potential or her talent. He gave her the truth, stripped of all sentiment. "Because incompetence, like my sister's, is an irritant," he said, "and competence, like yours, is a valuable asset. I do not allow valuable assets to be damaged." He looked at the broken pieces on the floor again. "Or discarded." He gestured toward the hallway. "A housekeeping team is on its way to clean this up. Go to the study, read the contract. My mother will be here for dinner shortly. She has been wanting to meet you." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Mina alone in the vast, silent room. She stood there for a long time, the echoes of his words rearranging the very architecture of her world. A valuable asset, not a servant, not a ghost. An asset. The cold clarity that had snapped into place moments before was now joined by a terrifying, disorienting flicker of hope. She looked down at the shattered celadon, and for the first time, she did not see a loss. She saw a foundation for something new being built from the rubble. The study was a world away from the bright, sterile expanse of the living room. It was paneled in dark, fragrant wood and lined floor to ceiling with books. Not decorative books, but worn, red volumes on history, philosophy, and economics, in at least 4 languages. A massive desk carved from a single piece of dark wood dominated the space. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and faint, lingering traces of cigar smoke. It was a room of substance, of deep, quiet, structural power. On the polished surface of the desk, a single file folder lay perfectly centered. Her name was typed on the label, Mina Kang. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The contract was inside, printed on heavy cream-colored paper. She read it, then read it again. The title, Curator, Kim Private Collection. The duties, cataloging, acquisition advisement, preservation, and installation. The salary was a number so large it seemed fictional, an order of magnitude beyond anything she had ever earned. It was more than enough to clear her debts in a matter of months. It was a rescue. A golden cage, perhaps, but a rescue nonetheless. She felt a wave of dizziness, a mixture of profound relief and a sharp, defensive prickle of pride. She was not a damsel in distress. She had been surviving, but this was not survival. This was an entirely different proposition. She sank into the leather chair behind the desk. It was enormous, clearly Jinwoo's. It enveloped her. She felt like a child playing dress-up in her father's office. She thought about his words. I do not allow valuable assets to be damaged. It was so transactional, so cold. And yet, it was the most profound gesture of respect she had received in over a year. He was not saving her out of pity. He was acquiring her out of pragmatism. He saw her worth, calculated it, and acted to secure it for his own benefit. There was a strange comfort in that ruthless logic. It was a language she understood far better than Charity. As she sat there, processing the tectonic shift in her life, a soft knock came at the door. An older woman entered, her hair a perfect silver coif, her posture as elegant and erect as a queen's. She wore a simple silk dress in a shade of deep indigo. It was Mrs. Kim, the matriarch of the family. Mina had seen her only from a distance, a figure of quiet, formidable grace. So, you are the young woman who has finally convinced my son to hire a proper curator, Mrs. Kim said. Her voice was warm, with a hint of dry amusement. She smiled, and her eyes, so like her son's, crinkled at the corners. There was none of Hannah's brittle vanity in her face, only intelligence and a deep, settled calm. Mina stood up quickly. Mrs. Kim, please, sit, the older woman said, gesturing for her to be at ease. She walked over to the desk and looked at the contract in Mina's hands. A good offer, I trust? It's very generous, Mina managed. Jinwoo is not generous, Mrs. Kim corrected gently. He is precise. He pays what things are worth. He has been complaining for years that his collection was a disorganized mess. He said he was waiting to find someone with the right eye. She looked at Mina, her gaze kind but penetrating. It seems he has found her. Mrs. Kim walked over to a glass cabinet in the corner of the room. Inside were dozens of exquisite ceramics, mostly Korean from various dynasties. She opened it and, with practiced hands, took out a small, unassuming bowl. She brought it over to the desk and placed it in front of Mina. My son told me what happened to your vase, she said softly. Hannah has a difficult nature. She lacks her father's charm and her brother's depth. A dangerous combination. She nudged the bowl toward Mina. This is a Goryeo dynasty original. The inlay work is quite special. I would be honored if you would accept it, not as a replacement, but as a welcome. Mina looked at the bowl. It was priceless, a museum piece, an object of breathtaking beauty and historical weight. To be offered it so freely, so gracefully, was overwhelming. Tears pricked at her eyes, the first she had allowed herself all day. "I can't," she whispered. "Of course you can," Mrs. Kim said simply. "Beauty should be in the hands of those who understand it." She looked at Mina's hands, which were resting on the desk. They were clean, and her nails were short, but there were faint calluses on her fingertips from her work, both recent and past. "These are the hands of a maker. My son recognized that. I do as well." The door opened again, and Jin-woo entered. He had changed from his suit into a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked less like a formidable mafia boss and more like a scholar at rest. He nodded to his mother, and then his eyes found Mina. He saw the ancient bowl on the desk and the unshed tears in her eyes. "Mother," he said, his voice a low note of warning, "do not overwhelm her." "Nonsense," Mrs. Kim replied briskly, though her eyes were still warm. "I am simply making her feel welcome, something this family has failed to do for a year." She turned back to Mina. "Dinner will be ready in an hour. Your new rooms are prepared. Go and rest. We will speak more later." It was a dismissal, but a kind one, an order wrapped in maternal concern. Mina stood, bowed her head slightly to both of them, and left the study, her mind a whirlwind. She did not take the bowl. She wouldn't dare. But the offer of it was a gift in itself. She found her way to the West Wing, a part of the penthouse she had only ever been in to clean. The suite was larger than her last apartment. A spacious bedroom with a wall of glass overlooking the glittering city, a sitting area with a small library of art books, and a bathroom carved from white marble. Her few meager belongings were already there, placed neatly in the walk-in closet. Her worn-out sweaters and sensible shoes looked comically out of place in the vast, luxurious space. On the bed, laid out carefully, was a dress. It was a simple, architecturally precise sheath of deep, emerald green silk. It was a dress that cost more than she used to make in a month. There was no note. There didn't need to be. It was another one of Jin-woo's quiet, decisive actions. A statement. "This is who you are now. Dress the part." She touched the fabric. It was cool and smooth beneath her fingertips. For a year, she had worn a drab gray uniform, a costume of invisibility. This dress was the opposite. It was a declaration. To put it on felt like a betrayal of the quiet, suffering woman she had been. To refuse felt like an act of self-sabotage. She stood under the spray of the rain shower in the marble bathroom, the water washing away the chemical scent of polish and the lingering grime of her old life. She thought about the choice she was making. This wasn't just a job. It was an alignment. She was placing her future in the hands of a man who moved in a world of shadows and quiet violence, a man who had exiled his own sister for breaking a piece of pottery. But he was also a man who saw her. Truly saw her. He had looked at the wreckage of her life and identified the valuable parts. She made her decision. Not out of weakness or desperation, but with the same cold clarity she had felt when her vase shattered. She would be an asset. She would be competent. She would earn the staggering salary and the respect that came with it. She would rebuild herself within the fortress he had offered her. She put on the emerald dress. It fit as if it had been made for her. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger, a woman with straight shoulders, a steady gaze, and a core of something that looked remarkably like strength. The woman on her knees in the living room was gone. This was someone new, someone built from the rubble. Dinner was a quiet affair. It was just the three of them, Mina, Jin-woo, and his mother, at a massive dining table that could have seated 20. The city lights twinkled below them like a fallen constellation. The food was exquisite, served by silent staff who moved with the same efficiency as Mr. Choi. Mina was tense, hyper-aware of her posture, of which fork to use. But Mrs. Kim spoke to her with easy grace, asking about her studies, her hometown, her family. She drew Mina out, not with intrusive questions, but with genuine curiosity. Jin-woo, for his part, was mostly silent. He watched. He listened. He observed the way Mina's hands, the hands of a maker, gestured as she described the difficulty of achieving a perfect celadon glaze. He listened to the quiet intelligence in her answers, the precision of her language. He had seen her endure his sister's petty tyranny with a resilience that bordered on monastic. Now, he was seeing the person she had been protecting underneath that placid surface, and he found that she was even more remarkable than his research had suggested. Later that week, he found her in his library, which now doubled as her office. She had already begun her work. The collection, which was spread throughout the penthouse and a climate-controlled storage facility downstairs, was vast and eclectic. It was a dragon's hoard, acquired over decades by his father and himself. Some pieces were for investment, some for leverage, some for pure private pleasure. It was a mess of ledgers, auction receipts, and anecdotal provenance. Mina was creating order from the chaos. She had set up a system on a new computer, cross-referencing every piece with digital photographs, historical records, and chemical analysis reports where available. She worked with a focused, silent intensity that he recognized. It was the same intensity he applied to his own business. She did not notice him enter. She was bent over a large, illuminated manuscript, a magnifying glass in her hand. Her hair was tied back, and a pair of reading glasses were perched on her nose. She looked academic, professional. She looked like she belonged there. He stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her work. In the safe in his bedroom, tucked away in a velvet box, was a ring. It was not a large, ostentatious diamond. It was a vintage piece, a flawless emerald, the exact shade of the dress he had chosen for her, set in a delicate platinum band that was as strong and as understated as she was. He had purchased it 6 months ago. He had bought it after seeing her for the first time, not in person, but on a security feed. He had been reviewing the household staff reports, a routine check. He'd seen her on her knees, cleaning a floor Hannah had deliberately scuffed, her face a mask of serene endurance. He had been struck by her grace under pressure. It was a quality he prized above all others. So he had asked Mr. Choi to compile a file. The more he learned, the more certain he became. He was a man who planned. He built his empire on patience, on observation, on waiting for the perfect moment to act. He had been waiting for the right moment to extricate her from his sister's orbit. Hannah's tantrum had not been a crisis. It had been an opportunity, an accelerant. Now, watching Mina work, he felt the quiet satisfaction of a long-term strategy coming to fruition. She was more than an asset. She was the missing piece in the architecture of his own life. He was a man who lived in a world of silence, too. A silence of power, of secrets, of isolation. Her silence was different. It was the silence of a bell waiting to be struck. And he found he wanted, very much, to be the one to hear it ring. The days turned into weeks. Mina settled into a new rhythm. A life of quiet work, of shared silent breakfasts with Jinwoo, of long conversations about art and history with his mother. The fear and anxiety that had been her constant companions began to recede, replaced by a steady sense of purpose. She was good at this job. She was exceptional at it. She rediscovered a part of herself she thought was dead, the part that found joy in scholarship, in beauty, in order. Her relationship with Jinwoo developed in the spaces between words. It was built on small gestures. He would leave a rare book on her desk that was relevant to her research. She would find a particular tea he liked and have it waiting for him when he returned late from a business meeting. They would sometimes sit in the library late at night, both working, the only sound the turning of pages and the soft clicking of her keyboard. It was a slow, respectful courtship conducted in the language of mutual recognition. He never touched her, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. He simply made space for her. He gave her safety, resources, and his unwavering, silent attention. And for Mina, who had been starved of being truly seen for so long, that attention was more intoxicating than any passionate declaration. She found herself observing him too. She saw the immense pressure he was under, the weight of the empire he commanded. She saw the moments of deep weariness he tried to hide. She saw the ruthless precision with which he conducted his business over encrypted phone lines, his voice never rising, his commands short and absolute. She did not know the details of what he did, and she did not ask. She understood that his world had sharp edges, that his power was not clean. But she also saw the man who listened intently when his mother spoke, the man who handled a 1,000-year-old piece of pottery with reverence, the man who had looked at her lowest point and seen not a victim but a peer. One evening, she found the courage to ask him. They were in the library, a storm raging outside, rattling the thick panes of glass. "That day," she began, her voice quiet, "in the living room. You had been there the whole time, hadn't you?" He looked up from the financial report he was reading. He did not pretend to misunderstand. "Yes. Why didn't you stop her sooner?" The question was not an accusation. It was a genuine inquiry. He closed the report and gave her his full attention. "I needed to see how far she would go," he said, "and I needed to see what you would do when she did." "What did you see?" she asked, her heart beating a little faster. "I saw her confirm her weakness," he said, "and I saw you confirm your strength. When she broke your vase, she expected you to break too. You did not. You got to your feet. You were preparing to leave. You were choosing to save yourself. I was merely expediting the process." He was right. In that moment of cold clarity, she had decided to walk. He hadn't rescued a helpless woman. He had intervened on behalf of a woman who was already in the process of rescuing herself. The realization settled deep inside her, solidifying her sense of self-worth. He had not given her strength. He had simply recognized the strength that was already there. Meanwhile, Hannah was languishing in the country. She was cut off from her friends. Her credit cards declined. Her social life non-existent. She was furious, humiliated, and bored. In her mind, this was all Mina's fault. The little servant had bewitched her brother, had schemed her way into a position of power. Hannah, in her arrogant delusion, believed it was a temporary infatuation. "Give him a month," she ranted to the only person who would take her calls, a sycophantic cousin. "He'll get tired of playing Pygmalion. He'll realize she still smells of floor polish and throw her out. She's just the help. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear." She decided to act. She couldn't get to her brother, but she could get to Mina. She hired a private investigator, a seedy man who promised to dig up dirt on Mina Kang. Hannah was convinced there was a sordid past, a secret she could use to expose Mina for the fraud she was. The investigator came back with very little: a failed business, debts, a messy breakup with her former partner. It was pathetic, but not scandalous. But in the file was one detail that caught Hannah's eye. The annual Obsidian Gala, the city's most exclusive and high-profile charity event, was in 2 weeks. The gala was organized by a committee on which Hannah had held a prominent seat for years, a seat her brother's foundation funded. A vicious plan formed in her mind. Jin Woo would be there. He always was. And he would, she was certain, bring Mina as his date. It would be Mina's grand debut into their world, and Hannah would be there to orchestrate her spectacular downfall. She would use her remaining influence with the committee members to create a scene. She would publicly accuse Mina, humiliate her in front of the city's elite. She would expose her as a gold-digging servant who had no place among them. Her brother, who hated public scenes above all else, would be forced to cast Mina aside to save face. It was perfect. She called in every favor she had left. She arranged for her name to be on the guest list, leveraging an old friendship with the gala's chairwoman. She bought a new dress, a fiery red creation designed to command attention. She was preparing for war, or she was making a fatal miscalculation. She was walking into a trap that had been set for her before she even knew she was the prey. Jinwoo knew about the investigator 2 hours after Hannah hired him. Mr. Choi had presented him with a file detailing the man's credentials, his methods, and his bank account, into which a large deposit from one of Hannah's few remaining accessible accounts had been made. Jin Woo had simply nodded. "Let him work. Report his findings to me first." He also knew Hannah had gotten herself on the gala's guest list. The chairwoman had called him, flustered and apologetic, to inform him. Jin Woo had told her it was perfectly fine. "Let her come," he had said, his voice calm. "It is important for families to support such worthy causes together." The trap was springing itself. The night of the Obsidian Gala arrived. The venue was a vast historic museum, its marble halls filled with the city's most powerful and influential figures. The air hummed with quiet conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Mina felt a tremor of anxiety as she stood beside Jinwoo in the grand foyer. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that he had had commissioned for her. It was understated, elegant, and impossibly expensive. A cascade of sapphires and diamonds loaned from the Kim family vault glittered at her throat. She looked and felt like a queen, but a queen in a foreign land. "Are you all right?" Jinwoo asked, his voice a low murmur near her ear. "I feel like an imposter," she admitted quietly. "You are the most qualified person in this room to appreciate the art on the walls," he replied, a statement of fact that was also, in its way, a comfort. "That makes you less of an imposter than most of the people here." He offered her his arm. "Stay close." They moved through the crowd, a vortex of power and grace. Conversations paused as they passed. Eyes followed them. Jinwoo nodded to business titans and political figures, his expression neutral. He introduced Mina simply. "This is Mina Kang." He gave her no other title, letting her presence speak for itself. And then she saw her. Hana, standing near the grand staircase, a slash of crimson against the cool marble. Her eyes were fixed on them, burning with a feverish intensity. She looked like a bird of prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Mina's hand tightened on Jinwoo's arm. "She's here." "I know," he said, his voice calm. "Do not be afraid. She can't touch you." Hana began to move toward them, a shark cutting through the water. Her face was arranged in a mask of righteous fury. People began to notice, the hum of the room dropping as a scene began to brew. She stopped directly in front of them, her posture radiating aggression. She ignored her brother completely, her venomous gaze fixed on Mina. "Well, well," Hana said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Look what the cat dragged in. I didn't realize they were letting the staff in through the front door this year." A collective gasp went through the onlookers. It was a brutal public salvo. Mina felt a hot flush of shame, the old shame, the feeling of being small and worthless. But then she looked at Jinwoo. He was perfectly still, his face unreadable. He had told her not to be afraid. She took a breath and held Hana's gaze, her own expression calm. She would not let this woman break her again. "What are you doing here?" Hana continued, her voice rising. "Did you think putting on a pretty dress would make you one of us? You are a servant, a scheming, social-climbing servant who preyed on my brother's loneliness." "Hana," Jinwoo said. His voice was not loud, but it sliced through her tirade. "That is enough." "No, it's not enough," she retorted, spinning to face him. "Are you so blind? She's using you. I had her investigated. She's a failed artist buried in debt. She came to our home to leech off of us, and you fell for it." The crowd was silent now, watching the family drama unfold with rapt attention. This was better than the auction. Jinwoo looked at his sister, and for the first time that evening, a flicker of emotion showed on his face. It was not anger. It was pity. "You had her investigated," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Yes, I know. I have the report. I also have the report on your own finances, Hana." Hana's eyes widened. "You seem to be under the impression that you have some power here," Jinwoo continued, his voice a calm, devastating monologue. "That you have a position in society to defend. Let me clarify the situation for you." He took a small step forward. "The seat you held on this gala's committee was funded by a grant from my foundation. I rescinded that grant this morning. The chairwoman was so sorry to see you go." Hana's face went white. "The line of credit you used to purchase that rather loud dress was underwritten by the Kim family's primary bank. As of yesterday, your name has been removed as a signatory on all family accounts. I trust you enjoyed your purchase. It will be your last for some time." A murmur went through the crowd. This was not just a family squabble. This was an execution. Your apartment, the one you love so much with the view of the park, Jin Woo went on, his tone conversational, is owned by a holding company. This morning, I purchased that holding company. The eviction notice is being delivered to your door as we speak. You have 30 days. Hana was trembling now, her mask of fury crumbling to reveal raw panic. You can't do that. I can, Jinwoo stated simply. And I have. You spoke of obligation. You have an obligation to this family to conduct yourself with a certain level of decorum. You have failed. Spectacularly. You spoke of leeching. You, who have not worked a day in your life, who have lived entirely off the wealth this family has generated, dare to accuse this woman. He turned slightly, his hand resting on the small of Mina's back, a gesture of ownership and protection that was absolute. Of being a parasite? He let the question hang in the air. Mina Kang, he said, his voice resonating with quiet pride, is a brilliant art historian and a gifted artist. She is the curator of my collection, a position she earned through sheer competence. She is, in every way that matters, my partner. He looked down at his sister, whose face had crumpled into a mask of utter despair. You did not just disrespect my partner. You did not just embarrass this family. You made the fatal error of believing that your position was earned when it was, in fact, merely borrowed, and the loan has been called in. Hana let out a strangled sob. The fiery red dress seemed to mock her, a costume for a power she no longer possessed. She dropped to her knees on the marble floor, the sound a dull, pathetic thud. Please, Jin Woo, she begged, her voice thick with tears. Please, I'm sorry. Don't do this. Not because he was sorry, because he was caught. Jin Woo looked down at her, his expression cold. He did not offer a hand. He did not offer a word of comfort. He simply turned his back on her. He looked at Mr. Choi, who appeared at his side as always. My sister is feeling unwell, Jin Woo said, his voice carrying in the silent hall. Please see her home. 2 discreet security guards moved forward, gently but firmly lifting Hana to her feet. She was sobbing uncontrollably now, a public and absolute ruin. They escorted her out, her cries echoing and then fading, leaving behind a profound and shocked silence. Jin Woo turned to the assembled crowd. His gaze swept over them, and not a single person could meet his eye. They had come for a spectacle, and they had gotten one. They had witnessed the quiet, brutal dismantling of a life. Then he turned to Mina. He ignored the shocked faces, the whispers that were beginning to start. He looked only at her. I believe, he said, his voice once again a low, private thing meant only for her. They are serving champagne on the terrace. He held out his arm. After a beat, she took it. She walked with him away from the scene of the execution, her head held high. She had not said a word. She had not needed to. He had fought the battle for her, not because she was weak, but because he was strong enough to do it. On the terrace, the cool night air was a relief. The city glittered below them, a carpet of diamonds. The sounds of the gala were a distant hum. Mina finally let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for a year, a slow, shuddering exhale. The weight on her chest, the weight of being underestimated, of being invisible, of being broken, was gone. It had been publicly, systematically, and irrevocably destroyed. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. There is nothing to thank me for, Jin Woo replied. He handed her a glass of champagne. I was merely protecting my interests. She looked at him, at his calm, handsome face illuminated by the city lights. Am I an interest, Jin Woo, or an asset? A faint smile touched his lips, a rare and precious thing. You are the curator of my collection, he said, and my collection is the thing I value most. He paused, his gaze intense. I would like to introduce you as such. He led her back inside, not to the main hall, but to a smaller, private salon where a select group of the museum's most important patrons were gathered. The museum director was there, as were several renowned collectors and critics. "Gentlemen," Jinwoo said, his voice drawing their immediate attention, "I would like to introduce Mina Kang." He did not say my partner or my date. He said, "She has recently taken over as the curator for my family's collection. She is, without question, the foremost expert on Joseon-era ceramics I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. Her insights into Goryeo inlay techniques are, frankly, revolutionary." He had given her back her name, not just her name, but her professional identity, her expertise. He had not introduced her as his possession, but as his peer, his equal. The vindication was so sharp, so pure, it almost brought her to her knees. But she stood tall, in her midnight velvet dress, and accepted the hands that were offered to her, the words of respect from men who had, an hour before, seen her as nothing more than a beautiful woman on a powerful man's arm. Later that night, back in the silent penthouse, they stood by the great window in the living room, the same room where her vase had been shattered. The space had been cleansed of that memory. "She will never bother you again," Jinwoo said. It was a promise. "What will happen to her?" Mina asked. She found, to her surprise, that she did not feel triumph, only a quiet sadness for a woman so hollowed out by her own vanity. "She will be provided for," he said. "She is still my sister. She will have a roof over her head and food to eat, but she will have no power, no influence, no access to the life she believed was her birthright. She will have to learn to live with herself. It will be the most difficult thing she has ever done." There was a long, comfortable silence between them, the kind of silence that is full, not empty. Then Jinwoo turned to her. "There is one more thing." He walked to his study and returned a moment later. In his hand was a small, dark velvet box. He did not get on one knee. He was not performing. He simply opened the box and held it out to her. Inside, nestled on a bed of black silk, was the ring. An emerald, deep and clear as a forest pool, flanked by two small, perfect diamonds. It was elegant, timeless, and powerful. It was a perfect reflection of her. "I bought this 6 months ago," he said, his voice steady. "I am a patient man, Mina. I have been waiting for you to be ready, for you to feel safe, for you to know your own worth so completely that this ring is not a rescue, but a confirmation." He looked into her eyes. "I am asking you to be my partner in all things, to build a life with me, to bring your light into my world of shadows, to create a new collection with me, one made of shared days and quiet nights. I am asking you to marry me." Mina looked at the ring, then back at his face. She saw no doubt there, only a quiet, absolute certainty. The same certainty she now felt in her own heart. This was not a fairy tale ending. It was a beginning. An earned, realistic, and profoundly right beginning. She did not say yes with a giddy cry. Her answer was as quiet and as sure as his question. "Yes," she said. A real smile reached her eyes, the first in a very long time. He took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She looked at her hand, the hand of a maker, now adorned with a promise. A promise of a future built not on passion, but on the bedrock of recognition, respect, and a deep, quiet, structural safety. They stood together, looking out at the city, two solitary people who had found in each other's silence a matching frequency, a home. The new beginning was here, and it was as solid and as beautiful as the art they both loved.